Koketso on CapeTalk, your number one news and talk station. CapeTalk Dads.
Yes, it is. It's a Tuesday. CapeTalk Dads it is. And we have this very important topic that we do need to discuss. And I remember when Kopano said, listen, this is what we could be doing. I started asking myself certain questions around my relationship with my own anger or control of anger. And I think that, to be honest, I'm still in that process of understanding it. But that is what we are talking about. And it's all anchored on an upcoming workshop by Dr. Shahieda Jansen, titled The Man's Anger, Harnessing the Emotion Within. And before I introduce our guests, I have to acknowledge my dear brother, Kopano Ratele. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, and I'm in the studio tonight.
Yeah, you know, we are blessed.
Yeah.
And I hope that we'll be joined soon by Mbuyiselo Botha as well. But let me say welcome to Dr. Shahieda Jansen, who is with us in studio. Thank you very much for making time and being part of this. And we'll be guided a lot by yourself, I must admit, around this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening.
Also with us is Donfrey, Meyer. Donfrey, I look forward to your inputs as well as part of the conversation.
Thank you, Koketso. Good to be here.
I want to throw it back at you, Kopano, to set the tone here. Let's talk about the importance of this conversation. And what I want to acknowledge up front is the fact that in a number of other conversations that we have had, while we might not have pinpointed issues of anger, but there have been an underlying theme in some of the conversations that we've had, especially if we were to look at how men behave and how the feelings inside manifest in their behavior or in their actions.
Just my words. I was thinking that in talking about violence, which we have done over several weeks in the past, we don't speak so much about emotion, but it's there. The part of emotion is there. But I want to us to throw it to Donfrey and Shahieda, so to set us up about precisely why the interest in anger, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you to pause because we are joined as well. Mbuyiselo Botha, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're well.
Well, I'm well, thank you so much, and I hope that the colleagues in the studio are well, and yes, good to join your game.
The only person missing here is you, Mbuyiselo, but I don't think we'll have enough microphones if you were here. but Shahieda, if we could come to you in response to what Kopano has said already.
Yeah, that we in fact, you know, that is often what is said, that when we talk about men and violence, we often perhaps come from a framework of let's look at the socioeconomic causes of violence, but we don't specifically speak of violence as in effect an extreme form of emotional expression. That violence is a form of expression of an emotion. And so tonight we will focus on and talk about emotion, but then broaden our understanding and talking about emotion, not just on the one extreme of anger and violence, but can we also talk about other emotions that men feel, that men also feel shame and sadness, and vulnerable and powerless and frustrated. So that's where I just like to start off by just naming some of the emotions that we
I've learned quite recently in exploring not only my own emotions but also in trying to understand other people's emotions, that shame can also manifest in many different ways, and some of it also being violent. But Donfrey, your initial reflections on this important conversation.
A few months ago, I started off with a group facilitation training with Shahieda, Groups for Africa. And what emerged was, just training about running small groups. And Shahieda and I came together and we thought, how can we devise a tool and a learning for men around this topic? And I think out of that brainstorming, it was anger that emerged, because it's quite topical today. And, we talk about emotion and violence. Violence is the expression, a behavior of a particular emotion. And so what underlines anger? And there's nothing really that, in today's term, being, coming from a home where I didn't have a father, for example, a lot of that grief or uncertainty and just kind of raw emotion was expressed in a certain way, not necessarily in a act of violence per se, but just in terms of the way I communicate necessarily with my family or my friends, it comes out. So I think, and that sort of underlines a lot of things. And what is there today the way you can learn something about these things that happens in daily life, and that's sort of how this workshop around anger emerged.
You spoke, Shahieda, about the we need to look at where it all comes from, and while we can have a whole conversation, like you said, around the socioeconomic challenges that exist, but there are many different emotions that we can talk about. Let's unpack where they come from.
Well, the latest neuroscience on emotion is very interesting. For instance, if you now look at what the scientific literature says about emotions, and you can read up on this on the internet, and they talk about the fact that there are in fact 7 different types of core or fundamental emotions that can be identified in the subcortical brain areas. So we know that our thoughts, our cognitive function come from the neocortex. But in fact, the scientists, or they call themselves affective neuroscientists, because they specialize in the understanding of the neurophysiology of emotion. And they've identified 7 types of emotional neurostructures that has been specially originated and come out of subcortical brain structures. For instance, neurons that are specified to experience grief or sadness, neurons specialized in the experience of joy or social joy, they call it. Neurons that are specialized to make us feel sexual excitement, caring, nurturing. Curiosity, for instance, is an emotion that we are neurologically wired to experience. Anger is one of the core emotions that there is neurological infrastructure that can now be identified. So I think and this is so exciting, because even in your psychology curricula, there are many psychologists that still believe that emotion is an outgrowth of cognition. Whereas now we have the latest neuroscience that confirm that men and women, we are all neurologically wired to experience these different types of emotion. But of course, just the fact that we are wired neurologically to feel these emotions does not mean these are just raw emotions. Our emotions and whatever we've been wired to experience always interact with our environment. So it's nature and nurture, because we don't want to get into that splitting debate.
On that, and just for clarity, so these 7 different types of emotions, us being wired, the difference between men and women, or is there a difference? Or are we all wired equally in terms of those 7, and it is then our nurturing that determines how the respective emotions manifest?
Well, I think I'm going to stop talking, emotions in a moment, but I have to mention the one author that I like to quote. I think I've forgotten her name now, but she's also a neuroscientist, and she came up with what she calls the gender similarities hypothesis.
Okay.
And what she says, because she studied the behavior of infants, little boys and little girls, before the age of 2, young infants. And she says that when you look at the behavior of little baby boys and little baby girls, it's very similar. Both boys and girls, are good at establishing attachment and relations, and they're cute, and they seduce adults into loving them and spending time with them. And she says it's only after the age of 2 when both the genetics as well as the environmental socialization kicks in, when boys start to prefer moving toys and girls, move towards dolls. But she says before that, both of them attracted to dolls and faces and attachment behavior and so on. So I think, so she says, so environment comes in and changes the way the genders relate, and particularly there's a strong gender component in the way we experience and express emotions. But she says it helps when we understand that we actually come from quite a similar place.
Yeah, and I think, Kopano, if I were to again bring in what we have been discussing, and what is at the core of how we are in this process of trying to understand ourselves a bit more as men, not only as fathers, is that moment where that separation from the similarity to the different and how it manifests. I think in a lot of ways we attempt very much to go back there to say if something was tweaked, or even in some cases broken, how do we fix it in such a way that we are able to then go back to that stage where it all is quite similar, if not the same?
Can I just, for me, why the gender similarities hypothesis is important is that we often, because, and I understand the enormity of male-driven violence in the South African context. It's enormous. The male rapes, or the rate of rapes in this country, etc., the murder rates, etc. It's all very extreme. But I think we often, when we speak about men, we tend to want to speak about them as if they are people who, in the first instance, do not experience feelings like shame, feelings like powerlessness, feelings like sadness, grieving and loss. And so it's important that even in the face of these immense negative statistics about male violence, we still need to remember and keep perspective that men do experience loss, do experience vulnerable emotions, also experience sadness, not as a way of minimizing or denying male culpability, because we ultimately hold people responsible for all of their behaviors, the good and the bad.
Be part of the conversation on 021-446-0567. Dr. Shahieda Jansen with us in studio, as well as Donfrey, Meyer, Kopano Ratele Mbuyiselo Botha. Kopano, I know you probably have a whole lot of questions, and I'll get to Mbuyiselo as well for his reflections or questions.
But Donfrey mentioned something interesting, which elaborates what Shahieda was talking about from a neuropsychological and neuroscience perspective. So 2 things which are suggested by Koketso's comment. So what happens after 2? That's the first question. And secondly, you said anger, Donfrey, you said anger is underlaid by different emotions, right? So what are these emotions? What are these emotions? I know shame is clearly part of it, but what are the emotions? But my comment, to leave it at that, is I always have this sense, not just from overt violence, but today again, this morning when I'm driving to work, and a car comes right up close behind me and just wants basically to push me out of the way. And I'm thinking, we are such an impatient and angry nation, in the morning. Of course, so that anger is one of the dominant emotions in this society, and it comes out in all kinds of ways. So,
before you answer, Shahieda and Donfrey, Mbuyiselo Botha, your reflections or questions.
In fact, I wanted to say to Dr. Shahieda and to Don, what role does society play? I mean, when I want to express how shameful I feel, how frustrated, what is the role where society then, does it encourage me? Is it not, what society says, but it's okay not to feel those things? I'm interested to know, because then you have a situation where, especially when we're relating to men, when you're violent, you don't have or do we have a society that in fact would, other than condemning, would actually not even embrace, or does society not play any role in ensuring that I am able to say, look, I'm vulnerable and I need help? Or society would say, look, it's okay, it's not okay to feel that way. In fact, it's okay to when you feel the opposite of being vulnerable.
It might be that Mbuyiselo's question, linking up to the first one by Kopano, of what happens at the age of 2, where that change happens, and could it be that there is what is the role of society, if at all, where that change happens at the age of 2? Shahieda, I think that's for you, because Donfrey is going to be dealing with the issue of anger driven by emotions, and what are those emotions?
I'm really having to think about how to answer this, and I want to answer it in a far more generic manner. I think that you, as human beings, male or female, in between, trans, not trans, we all go through a process of socialization. It takes a long time before we are actually able to be independent and function, So we go through a long period where and it makes me think now also philosophically about the concept of Ubuntu. You become a human being through other human beings. So what does it say about you as the individual person, about the other human beings that you had been exposed to since even before birth? Because we now also have evidence that even while the mother carries the baby, there's a process of socialization that has already kicked in. All right, the way that mother feels during the pregnancy, the way she's being treated, the way she feels that she's belong and that she's being cared for, all has an impact on the baby that she's carrying. So as human beings, we are shaped, not determined necessarily, right? Our fate isn't sealed by our environment, but clearly, even when we grow up close to the sea, or close to the mountains, or close to rivers, it affects, it shapes the way we behave, the way we feel about ourselves. So you're asking me, and I'm saying to you, where does the self begin and where does it end?
What is our responsibility in being able to shape ourselves and those around us? Do we place the responsibility purely on the individual, or do we, as a collect, the whole notion of it takes a village to raise a child, right? Donfrey, you've got a question that you need to answer.
I'll give it a go. Kopano asked, so just so I got it. So I mentioned that anger is the emotions that underlies anger, I think is what I said.
Yeah.
And issues could be like around hurt, hurt for one. Hurt could be I can talk from my personal story, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of not having a father after a certain age. He was, you know, he passed away, and I think there's many people that can relate to that. So the hurt of not having that there, so you know, that could be an underlying emotion. For one, frustration in your social environment, your schooling environment, your work environment, in your home environment. To kind of give you an example of two.
Do we have I want to get to the specifics of men and the work that you do with men on this topic, and the workshop that you will be hosting, and the work that you guys do together. But of course, do join the conversation on 021-446-0567. What is your personal relationship or connection or disconnect with your emotions? And to go back to what you said, Shahieda, about it is very much our lived experiences that determine what happens, or at least shape, because like you said, and it's so important that you are not locked into that.
No.
And to seeing that we're being very personal there, Donfrey, this Kopano give me the look. Because I've realized that over a period of time, there was a certain freedom that I had with my emotions for a while, and then certain things happened where I somewhat, I don't know if it's regressed or something happened, and then over the past few years, I've found myself and recognized myself reconnecting with certain elements of myself that at some point had kind of I don't know, was buried somewhere. And I wanna get specific around and I know this what I just explained is what anybody would go through, but let's talk about men. Let's talk about what happens with men. What are the stories that you have found? What are the challenges that you are confronted with in the work that you do? And how can we help each other out when it comes to this and our attachment to our emotions, our connection or reconnection to our various emotions? And we'll get into that after this.
Cape Talk Dads.
Cape Talk Dads, it is at 29 minutes to 10 if you've just joined us. Ooh, a man's anger, harnessing the emotion within. We are talking about emotions, emotions that we are born with. If one were to look at affective neuroscientists and what they say, what they outlined around the 7 different emotions that we have as a people. And as Shahieda Jansen shared with us, it starts from the time our socialization, starting from the time that we are in our mother's tummies, and when we are born with this. But something happens at a certain age. Where there is then that difference in gender, if one could say so. A lot of it has got to do with our socialization. But Shahieda, together with Donfrey, Meyer, doing amazing work with men in dealing with and digging into this whole question around anger. And these are the specifics that I want to get to now, Shahieda, about the work that you do, how you approach it, and some of the stories, I suppose, that you could share around what you have found as you deal with this very important matter.
Look, I find that if I'm approached by, and I only work with men who volunteer. I don't deal with court-ordered men. I don't deal with men who are resistant to dealing with the emotions, because the nature of the work that I do requires that you volunteer and you're open to the idea of taking what psychologists like to refer to as a meta position or a third position on yourself. You are open to reflection, and you are open at taking a critical look at yourself, and you are also capable of in fact, tolerating a broad range of emotions. So when your tender emotions and sadness and loss or feelings of rejection, you are starting to experience that you're able to stay in the field and not bolt through the door.
Yeah, because that's a tough one. That's a tough one. This is getting warm now, right? Then suddenly you're being confronted by yourself.
And so you start to feel, because that is why anger is so popular. Not just with men, by the way, right? Anger is so popular because it makes us feel strong, and it puts us in control, and it gives us something to do. Whereas when you start going under the anger, and it's actually just very close under, it's not far under the anger, you will find when you start saying to somebody, all right, so let's start going and feeling and getting in touch with what's under, and I like to call it the iceberg, and I have what I use an iceberg exercise, where we draw an iceberg, and that little tip is the anger, and then there's a whole lot of the rest of the emotions is in fact under the tip of the iceberg. And so when people start to feel emotions like how they were abused themselves, how they were humiliated, their helplessness that they used to feel, then it gets very difficult to contain and to stay with those feelings. Because remember, the approach that I use is called an emotion-focused approach, because I got to take you and accompany you so that you get close enough to certain feelings under the iceberg, close enough and long enough so that you can be informed and transformed by those feelings, because that is why we take you close to your emotions.
You're doing this in a workshop setting, no?
No, in a men's group setting. So the men's group is where men come and do the more long-term work to transform, for inner transformation. Individually? As a group.
Okay, so I used the wrong in saying workshop. So as a group, right? You take people who within a certain group to certain places where obviously they would be individually responding in different ways.
But also now, remember now, when we talk about, because now I'm doing group work. So group work in itself opens up certain kinds of transformational processes.
Within the framework of the group.
Within the framework of contracting, because when I prepare you to come into a group, you get prepared, and there's a process, right? And you buy into and you agree on the purpose of the group, which is to go near your emotions in order to transform you. So there's outcomes that you're buying into, but you're also buying into a process that you will go and sit and tolerate certain emotions so that you allow yourself, because it is emotions that transform us.
Donfrey, again, this is where resistance can come in, and I understand the.
Hey, by the way, sorry, I'm interrupting. He just used the word resistance right there.
Yeah, no,
it's a big thing. It's
a
huge thing.
Sure, right? Because while you prepare, as you said, Shahieda, you are prepared to come into this group. Certain things are going to happen within this group. And then suddenly, while working on it and cooking, right, in that process, something happens inside of me. So Donfrey, then, while we are in this group, and I might have been briefed that this is what happens in this group and this is how I need to approach it, then I'm recognizing through the work of the group and what is happening certain emotions that come up. And I suppose where the resistance come in using that word is already as a man, based on whatever I've lived, I'm not yet comfortable in opening myself up even to another man. But here we are in a group where certain emotions I'm recognizing as we are in session. And I'm doing it while Kopano is right next to me and Donfrey is right next to me, and that's where the resistance come in. How do you deal with that?
It's it's an issue of trust, right? You need to have a contract of trust within the group environment. So I think there's a confidentiality that comes in, and within the group setting, you have other men within the group who have a specific reason why they're there. They're also wanting to learn, wanting to unpack that, the iceberg of that emotion. So it's also about having trust within the group, knowing there's a safe space that you can share accordingly, and and that the purpose of sharing is to grow, because that's really where you're going to find the change taking place, and also learning from your fellow group members.
Because the mere fact that they are now, because here there's a men's group here, I've got 4 men here in the room plus 1 on the phone. So the mere fact that you're now sitting already, before anybody has opened up, by the way, before you've even gone to your emotions, the mere fact that there are 5 or 6 men who has committed to come, who has rocked up, who has turned up at the venue for the first session, in that first hour, already changes the game. Because when you walk into the room and you see that there are other men in the room who has come for the same purpose, it is already a game changer.
Your calls on 021-446-0567. Mbuyiselo Botha, I'm going to give it to you for a little bit.
Well, KK, what I like about, what Shahieda is saying is that, when I go into the room, there is a confirmation that, look, I am not the only one, that I seek help. And that, it's that I find that process, it's also a reassuring process. It says to me, it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay, because when we've always been taught that when you're in your own corner, as a man, you feel that, look, I can't share this with this individual. I can't tell them, because then our society is such that it's not even ready to accept if I tell you that, look, I'm weak, I need help, I am vulnerable. But when I go into that room and see other like-minded, or people who are in the same journey as I, who are struggling, who are battling, it gives me a sense of comfortability that, look, I'll be able, when I KK, to say to Kopano, look, you know what, things are not going as well as I thought, because there is, if you like, the like-minded, there are people that I may be able, at all levels, be able to bond with them.
Can I respond to what Mbuyiselo is saying? Because, I've been running men's groups since 2009, and I've been running them on campuses and off campuses, so with older men and with young men. And I find that I have never ever experienced men pouncing on each other in these groups, trying to shame one another or trying to break each other's manhood, because you usually have a guy that sets the pace, and the guy who's more comfortable with expressing his emotions. So obviously, as a skilled group facilitator, you know how to also use that kind of person for the purpose of, encouraging the group to follow that example. But I have not experienced, not only like Mbuyiselo was saying, is it comforting and reassuring when the man walks in and he sees, okay, there's other men, but also what I find, men support each other. They tend to be, immediately there's almost like a brotherly, of men of quite different cultural backgrounds, but the minute they seem to come into these groups and they know, okay, this is why we are here, they support each other. They don't break each other down. I've not experienced it yet.
Kopano?
I have so many questions, but
of course you do.
Of course, my brother. Listen, one of the things I think the listeners would be interested in, and I think we want to pick it up right here. So, I'm sure people bring a lot of stuff around their own journey, being fathered, right, or absent father, being hurt by their fathers. turn it around. What do these men, some of them are fathers, right? What do they benefit from this? What benefit do they, as fathers, around anger? Do they benefit in, well, let me not put words in your mouth. That's the one question. The other part, of course, I'm sure listeners are quite interested in this. A Shahieda woman working with men, working with you, Donfrey.
Yeah, I was going to go there.
Say something about
as well.
I mean, really,
I was waiting.
Why are you interested, Donfrey first? Why are you interested in working on this? Well, you touched on this. Anyway, I'm interpreting you about stuff around your own father not being there and men working the hurt when you looked for that. But why are you interested in this? The last question is this. I hope you can address all of them. I'm really. There was a moment there. There was a moment. I don't know you. And the moment was the way Shahieda was speaking. I'm thinking, why aren't more men availing themselves to this work of going in and saying, look, man, I'm hurt. I am, because I reckon what Koketso was already going there, but without getting personal. And Mbuyiselo, my brother, I know you're there, but you say, well, there's a lot of hurt in this country, and it continues. It just continues. Men around the road, you see men without work. I'm thinking, how do you survive this humiliation, this shame? So why aren't men availing themselves to this?
Because
okay.
I need to respond to that first, because the thing is, is it that men are not availing themselves, or is it that society is not quite ready?
All right. What do you mean?
Because I can tell you from my own experience, I can meet a man who approaches me and he really needs assistance, and it's very difficult to get, and the man is open to working and he's ready and he wants to change and he's sincere. And there aren't many places where a man can go to.
Does that mean that there's a lot more resistance on the part of society than there is from men? Don?
Well, Mr. Botha.
Yes.
He touched on it as well earlier on when he was asking around society and, the acceptance of society within our current frame. And I mean, if you take South Africa as the context that, given our history, where we are at and where we're hoping to go, there's a lot of underlying societal constructs that we've had to deal with, right? And Kopano and I spoke about this some time ago, and we all know the history about how men needs to be tough, men needs to be a certain way. If you are suffering, if you hurt, kind of just suck it up in a way. And there's, and Shahieda mentioned it, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of underlying feelings. Where does it go? How does it get released? How do we purge that in South Africa society today? And, as that conversation started, like we're doing tonight, and where can men go? And what? Yeah. And I'm not only talking about men from a, let's say, the age group between 35 and 50, because you've got grandfathers who are alive today. They've come with a lot of wisdom, a lot of, insight.
Yeah. And baggage.
And probably baggage too. And you've got, a younger society now of young men growing up, who need role models, who need people to impart knowledge. And I think it happens perhaps on maybe a family level. On an individual level. If you look at families, for example, maybe there's a small percentage of society that has that example, but on the broader society base, who necessarily maybe doesn't have men in their lives, or but I mean, let me not generalize. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying all men come with their issues as well.
Yeah,
but I'm talking the role of that particular man in society today. How is the South African public accepting of it, and how can we better develop men in our society?
I want to just after the break just talk about you mentioned Donfrey where do men go? And you guys are providing a platform, a place where men can go, and I want to talk about that in the next few. It is 12 minutes to 10. You are more than welcome to join the conversation, give your reflections of what you've heard so far. You might even want to share your own journey with your own emotions, or even just confidently say, guys, tell me where and I will be there.
CapeTalk Dads.
CapeTalk Dads, it is at 10 minutes to 10. Shahieda, Jansen, Donfrey, Meyer, Kopano Ratele Mbuyiselo Botha. We've been just dealing with emotions and men and our emotions. And there was a point that Donfrey raised just before we took the break, speaking of men asking the question, so where can we go? Where can we gather and safely discuss these matters? And Shahieda, there is a platform that you have, a space that you have created for men. Tell us about that.
So there are two spaces at the moment. The one is the men's group, the long-term private men's group that I've been running since 2010. So every so often the group opens up and it's open to receive new members to be integrated and received into this ongoing group. And the purpose of this group is for personal transformation. In other words, to get close to your own emotions. So there's it's a small group, about 5 men currently. So we're opening it up for 1 or 2 other men. And that group, the first group will happen now on the 12th of July, next Wednesday evening, from 6 till 7:30. So we expect a commitment for every Wednesday from 6 till 7:30 we meet. And so you become part of this culture where men talk about, I want to be a better father, I've got low self-esteem, I react with anger like that, I don't like myself, I hate my job, problems with the missus, whatever. So it's a variety of issues, but what they have in common is that they together and struggling and working through whatever it is they bring into the group. So that's the one thing. And then the other opening that we're having is that we're going to be running a once or 4-hour workshop on men's anger. And so we're taking an interactive look at understanding anger, a little bit of neurobiology, understanding what anger is, and then we're looking at the anger iceberg, so that you can understand to what extent is your anger informed by other stuff. Is this pure anger, or is this actually, hurt masquerading as anger? And then the last outcome for that workshop is to give you the skills to be able to express your anger in a way that doesn't hurt yourself and other people.
So that's one session of 4 hours.
That's a once-off workshop.
Okay.
And that's just for guys who want to come out and come and see and say, okay, I do have some anger stuff. I'd like to actually explore myself in a workshop environment that's safe. So we'll contract a little bit about ground rules and confidentiality and what's expected. And then you will get an opportunity where you, in a very hands-on way, get to understand anger, and then your own anger and your own behavior.
Are there costs to this?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So the once-off workshop on anger is 400 Rand, and that is also medical aid deductible.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hello.
And then the ongoing men's group costs 250 per session so if it's a 4-week month, then you pay 1,000 Rand for attending that group, and then the least amount of time that we expect you to commit to is 6 months. So that's really looking at a more longer term, and that's why it's made so cost effective, so that people can afford to spend and budget that kind of output, and then that's the only cost that is involved.
So you mentioned the long-term one. The next session is the 12th of July, 6 to 7:30. The once-off one, when is that being held?
On the 29th of July, from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock. So 4 hours.
How do we get in touch? I want to get the logistics and context out the way with a few minutes.
So the flyer on the Man's Anger Workshop is on the website www.madeformen.co.za, and it's made, as you say, made, MADEFORMEN, madeformen.co.za. So you'll find the flyer of the Man's Anger Workshop on there, and there are contact details, email and telephone number, and information on the men's group, the long-term men's group. There's a brochure on the same website, madeformen.co.za. You can download it, you can click on there, and you get more details about
The website is madeformen.co.za. There is a long-term men's group. The next session, 12th of July, 6 to 7:30, 200 Rand per session. You must commit to 6 months. It's a very close-knit group. And then there is the once or 4-hour workshop around men's anger on the 29th of July, 2 to 6 p.m., 400 Rand cost. More information, madeformen.co.za. We've got about 3 minutes. Mbuyiselo Botha, your final reflection or questions?
Well, KK, I have no question but to say that we've always said as a country, a society, that how do men deal with anger? Now, here's an opportunity that I hope that we'll be able to, it can be replicated to, many parts of our country, where men find, it's comfortable to say it's okay to feel low, it's okay to want to seek help, so that issues of anger management, we don't always think that we are born naturally angry, that, this is how men behave, this is who we are, we can do nothing about it.
Kopano Ratele.
This flyer says males age 15 and over. This is suitable for them. I know you have to get paid to do this. This is you're spending hours, but I am feeling so bad right now for those young men in the townships who can't afford this. But this is not because of it. It's because that there are not enough spaces for men to get to work through their stuff, and absolutely this is so necessary, to repeat what Mbuyiselo said.
I think what I'm going to make it our responsibility, Kopano, to say that if we put our heads together and go and find somebody, people who are able to provide or acknowledging the time that Shahieda and Donfrey put into the work, and being able to say thank you very much, but do that with them availing themselves for conversations that need to be had.
Let's do this.
Yeah, no, we're doing this.
Let's do this.
I just told you, we're doing this.
Let's do this. All right.
Just Donfrey, your last words.
Just thank you. Thank you to Shahieda, to you, Koketso and Kopano, and for having us here tonight, and Mr. Botha. It's been great, and we hope that we can discuss our engagements and feedback of the sessions taking place over the next few weeks and months.
Yep. You don't know, but you just committed to a long-term relationship with this here journey that we're walking. Shahieda.
Well, I want to, in a way, respond in closing by maybe answering some of the questions that Kopano had asked.
Can you see as it's ticking to the top of the hour, that's all you have time for.
So I think in terms of being a woman who runs a men's group, I think for me it's often an affirmation of my understanding of men's openness to transformation and their willingness to engage with their emotions, that I've always experienced, that I've never had any resistance to the fact that I'm a woman. So that's the one thing that I want to end off with. And then I think, perhaps it also has to do that fundamental to my approach to working with men is that I always say, before you theorize with people, before you want to examine all their problems, you first go in with respect and curiosity. And I think I always approach men with a curiosity and with an understanding there's probably 3 or 4 different male codes in the room. They may all differ, but there is some code, because we all have some code, some culture, some value, hierarchy, some things that are important to us in the way we like to do things. And I think for me, if you approach men that way, whether I go into the prisons, whether I'm in a township, on campus, or with nice middle-class men in the suburbs, I find that fundamental to my approach is approach with respect. Men are part of the human society. They are the other side of the coin. Women on the one side and men on the other side of the coin. They are part of the human family. So that's, I think, where I'd like to leave it.
Thank you very much. Shahieda, Jansen, thank you, Donfrey, Meyer. Remember that as you have 2 options in how you can engage in the work that Shahieda and Donfrey are doing. There is the long-term men's group, where it's really a focus on personal transformation. At the moment, they've got 5 men. They keep it tight. There's space for more, but there's a process to it. It's a 6-month journey that you walk at 200 Rand per person. It's happening on the 12th of July between 6 and 7:30 in the evening. And then there is the once-off 4-hour session on men's anger on the 29th of July between 2 and 6 p.m. at 400 Rand a session. For more information, contact details, go to madeformen.co.za, madeformen.co.za. Thank you very much.